Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. Here we are on Monday.
Good morning. Happy Monday.
Yeah, happy Monday. We're excited to start a new week, continue where we've left off. We had a good, fun time last week with Bob and Carrie Rockwell
I just love
joining
them,
us.
yes.
That was sure fun. And then we had our end times discussion where we're getting into the signs that Jesus said, well, watch for these. And it was kind of a fun discussion about birth pangs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how clearly you described that about that what happens is which I only observed is the contractions start happening and they get more intense, they get more frequent, and then it gets moving, and all of a sudden, okay, here it is. Get ready to go. Linda, by the way, we have 3 children. We were married, when I was 20, she's 18.
Wow.
So she had just, getting out of high school. I was only a junior in college because I had gone through a kind of accelerated getting through. we got married. And back in those days, Kathy, a male under the age of 21, I could not go get married per se.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had to have my family, my mom and dad had to sign a document that they were approving of me getting married.
Wow.
Interesting.
And now did Linda as well?
No, interesting enough for the woman, if you were 18 or over, you didn't need it. So it was just me.
Wow, that's interesting.
It was just me, to do that. So then, we graduate. I graduate in the middle of the year, 3.5 years of college, and I go to grad school. And after we get into grad school, Linda is pregnant. And that was a shock.
Wasn't quite what you had planned?
No, it wasn't what we had planned, and she just wasn't feeling great, and she came. I remember coming out of the obstetrician's office. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and actually it was a gynecologist, and I thought she's going in to figure out what the problem was. And she comes out and she says, well, I know the problem.
Oh, no.
What? She says, I'm pregnant. And I said, no. And by the way, for her, it was very unusual because she was now close to 4 months pregnant, and she had, for 3 months, had continued to have her period.
Oh, you're kidding. She really had no idea.
She had no idea. And when she told me, I thought she was kidding. Wow. Nah, what really is the problem? She said, I'm pregnant. And she gives me the slip of what the doctor said. I said, we're going to have a baby. I gotta get going here. So we, she, 5 months later, Linda, she never really looked pregnant. Up toward the end, she got a little bit big, but
right.
She just carried it. And that was true for all of the pregnancies, but
lucky lady.
I finished my last final, and literally the next day, the contractions happen. And then and the birth pangs come, and it gets more and more intense. And then the day after that, her water broke, and she said, this is it. And okay, so we go to the hospital, and this is true for all of her babies. But after that moment, we drive to the hospital. And she delivers in 2 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Every time. It was she delivered in 2 hours. And I said, "Gee, that was pretty easy, wasn't it, honey?" She said,
imagine she corrected
she
you on
corrected
that
me.
one.
She said, "No, if you could trade places with me, you'd understand it, But it was really interesting, just that whole discussion of birth pangs, and then the speed. Interesting enough, it picks up speed and intensity, and then boom, there it is. And so we talked about that last Friday about birth pangs, and one of the reasons that you and I are having this podcast is what we call it is Come and See, Finding Truth in a World of Chaos. Is one of the birth pangs is chaos.
Yes.
And again,
on multiple fronts.
Yeah, on multiple fronts. And in my lifetime, regularity was experienced, almost my entire life of, and I'm not talking about not having economic cycles and things happen, but there was a predictability to it. There was a order to it. The governments of the world, there was conflict and stuff, but fundamentally there was order and there was cooperation, and politically in our country there was there's two sides, but there was cooperation to it. There was order. Right. Well, we've seen just in the last 10 years the intensity of chaos, and chaos being defined as abrupt change that isn't predicted, that has an outcome that isn't known normally.
Right.
So that would be chaos. And so, we're experiencing it right now. And again, over the weekend, a couple things. Israel, we've talked a lot about Israel.
Right.
Gantz, who is the defense minister now in the new government, he came out and said that Israel is preparing to attack Iran. Now, the way I read that is he's trying to set Iran on notice.
Right.
That you'd better stop, these attacks.
I was going to say, this is a retaliatory thing, right?
Well, it's a little bit stronger. They've been attacked out of Lebanon. And this happened recently. They've been attacked out of Lebanon again, Hezbollah, and they're lobbing missiles into northern Israel, which they're blocking pretty well, by the way. But whenever that happens, again, their philosophy is, if you attack us, we're coming after you. Right. So they are coming after Hezbollah somewhat in Lebanon, but they basically have said, and they probably know more than they're telling us, that behind this all is Iran.
Right.
And so they basically have stated, we're preparing to come after you. Now they haven't said how, what, or when. They just made that statement. The way I read it is, do I think Israel's going to a full-scale attack against Iran? No. What I think is that they're telling them, you need to stop attacking us. If you keep attacking us and you keep supplying the people to attack us, and you intensify it, then we're coming after you, because they know they're the source of it. So I think that's a threat. But again, it's contributing to the chaos of, well, that'll be interesting, to see how that plays out and what happens with Hezbollah and potentially attacking Iran, which is just a statement at the moment. And then economically, a couple of interesting things is that the projections of the economy is that it's slowing down, and could be impacted dramatically by the next wave of COVID, which is called the Delta variant and then the Columbia variant. And again, it's a kind of a political football right now, is what does the data really show and what are they going to do with it? But there's a threat, and by the way, this is worldwide, to shut down the economies again. Right. Well, that's going to cause a lot of chaos one more time in terms of the impact of that and what's going to happen with that. And the numbers for inflation continue to rise. And, the Fed has been saying transitory, temporary, but they're starting to change their language. This might be long. This might be a little bit longer, and by the way, more intense. So.
Right. Well, and so it's interesting to me that and there's cycles to this, I understand, but that this is all coming. The rumors of locking down again, and some of these parameters that are coming in are also coming on the heels of certain government supplements and things ending. And so now suddenly they're having valid reasons to potentially re-up some of these government handouts.
Yes. Just an example of that would be the period for ending the inability of landlords to evict non-paying renters ended last week.
Right.
The landlords were basically, and remember, interesting enough, and this is something that's going to contribute to the chaos, but if you're a renter and you haven't been paying for now a year and a half, well, think of the magnitude of that.
Right.
If you just took what you would pay for a mortgage or pay for rent and just multiply it by 18.
Right.
That's a big number. By the way,
absolutely,
a number that,
and there's somebody on the other side of that who's not receiving that.
But that's a big number, and the majority, and we're talking about, interesting enough, almost something like 85% of the American people live week to week. They don't have a saving. They don't have a dramatic saving. They don't have so they're 18 times their rent. The truth is, they don't have it available to pay because they've been living off government subsidy, and they've been using their money not to pay rent, but to try just to exist and live. Right. So their money's gone. It's not like they saved it. Well, the moratorium being ended was supposed to basically say this: you owe all that money, which is legitimate. They were just like if I have a mortgage on a house.
Oh, so it wasn't just a pass on it.
No,
I thought it was just a pass.
No, it was okay. You didn't have to pay the cash flow of it, but you are obligated to pay what is owed. And so not only
in the world is that going to happen?
Well, just think about that. So now, you got to pay it back. 85% of the people, they say, well, we can't do that. We don't have it. Even the struggle of paying just current rent, just start paying rent.
Right.
Which is how you interpreted it, is, they just had to start paying rent. No, they got to pay rent and they got to pay everything back.
Wow.
What happened, and again, this is what you're saying about the impact of this, is that the CDC came out and said, we're extending the moratorium till October. Multiple levels of chaos with that.
Right.
One is, by the way, they still are going to owe the money at the end of that, but they don't have to pay it at the moment. And then, of course, the biggest pushback on that is from landlords. Who say, hey, I haven't been paid for 18 months, and
I still had to pay my mortgage,
and I've still had to pay my mortgages, and I can't afford another 6 months of this where I don't get paid. If they're not there, then I need to get them out so that somebody who is willing to pay can pay. But they just put in a moratorium. Okay, so that's one level of chaos, which is disruptive. And by the way, because of these programs ending, like unemployment benefits, stimulus payments, rent abatement, those are all ending.
Right.
So there's a motivation by politicians to say, well, let's keep paying that. Well, if you have a shutdown, a lockdown, that would say, well, we have to.
That would justify it, right?
Yeah, it would justify doing it. They don't even have to decide to do it. They would just justify doing it. Okay, now on top of it, and here's another level of chaos, and this is interesting. The CDC, and I've been in medicine my entire career. CDC is the Center for Disease Control.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. That's what it's always been. And it's supposed to just manage the diseases of the nation and the world, so that and originally, by the way, it started out to control malaria.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Huh.
We got to have a central agency to try to help us control malaria, which they did, and they did it really effectively. So that when an outbreak happens of it could be influenza, it could be Ebola, all these different things. There have laboratories that are trying to get to the bottom of everything, the causes of the roots of it, and then they put out notices that there's an outbreak here, and therefore here's a recommendation on the outbreak. So they're the ones primarily controlling the motivation of quarantine, mask,
Right.
quarantine, mask, vaccines.
Right.
All of that's coming out of the CDC and the leadership of the CDC. Well, okay, we get that, understand that. CDC is the one that came out and said we have a moratorium on rent. Well, wait a second. They're disease. They're not economic.
That's interesting. I didn't realize.
Yeah, they're economic, and the Supreme Court ruled 6 weeks ago. The CDC doesn't have the authority to do that. But they did it anyway.
But they did. Did they do the initial one? Or
they did the initial one.
Okay.
And
I
then
had no idea.
Yeah, and then they just did it again, including we know that we don't have the authority to do it, but we're declaring this to be so. So what's going to happen now. And so remember, I'm just trying to describe chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, you're going to have all kinds of legal challenges to that.
Right.
To say, wait a second, the Supreme Court decided and you're doing, and you don't have the authority to do this. And isn't it supposed to be from the lawyer or from the politicians, the senators and congressmen that we elected to decide if they're going to do that or not?
Right.
And they bypassed that. And so, and again, it's not a matter of, again, you could look at all sides of this and say, well, they should do that, and that's a good thing that they're doing. And I'm not even debating any of that at all.
Because really on the other side of every policy is an actual person.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving factors.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not debating. I'm not debating the decision. What I'm saying to us is, it's contributing to the chaos because we aren't following normal, established order, protocol, how we function. Because our nation was built on a three-legged stool, and that is the what's called the judicial branch, the courts, the executive branch, and the legislative branch, and the way it was intended to work, which was the setup, and it worked that way for several hundred years actually. Laws were made by the senators and congressmen, and again they had this brilliant idea of how to do this. And by the way, it was born out of a interesting event at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. The legislators came together, and they're forming the country. Now, remember, we're a country already. We have leadership of it. George Washington is heading it up, and they're deciding the structure. What is our democracy? How is that going to function in reality. And so they had already set up, okay, let's have an executive branch, the presidency. Let's have a judicial branch, the courts, and let's have this legislative branch that makes the law, that contributes to the laws, and of the people, by the people, elected by the people. Well, back then, and remember, you think of the original 13 colonies.
Mm-hmm.
There's big ones and small ones. The big ones said, let's do it by representation of size. And when I say big, I'm talking about population.
Population, right.
And the small ones said, no.
Land.
We want it by equal representation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have equal vote. Nobody has more votes than the other. And so they were stuck, and they're debating back and forth, and yeah, but, and they couldn't come to a conclusion. So Ben Franklin, and they're in Philadelphia, he says, okay, everybody, look, we don't know. Let's go ask God. And we're going to, all of us are going to go out, we're going to fast and pray, and we're all going to ask all the preachers of Philadelphia to speak to us what they hear God say. And then we'll come back and let's see what God said, because I believe we'll get an answer from God.
Right.
So they do. So they fast and pray. They go out the next day, all the preachers of the city go to their churches, and they all show up and they preach what they believe God is saying. They hear it, and it basically was around justice and fairness. And so they come back, and while they're out there, and it wasn't Franklin himself, but other people said, you know what? I think we can do both. What do you mean? Let's have one branch of legislation be equal. The other branch be by population.
Right.
And then those two bodies have to negotiate the law. And then when they get it settled and vote on it together, they both agree to the same language, then send it to the executive branch, and they have to sign it. And they had a veto process already that if the president disagreed, he could veto it, but then it could be overridden. And so that's how the Senate and the Congress was developed. Senate, two senators per state, equal vote. Congress, population.
Right.
And it was brilliant, what happened. So the order that was always intended was that body who's representing the people make and contribute in making law. They decide it, they negotiate it, get it agreed to, then they send it to the executive branch. The executive branch signs it or doesn't sign it, but they primarily would. Then the court, the whole court system, all the way from city, state, and federal, including the Supreme Court, they were strictly called to interpret, according to the Constitution, the laws that were now agreed to. So they could say, yep, that's valid, or you know what, that doesn't conform to the Constitution, and so we call strike that law down. And you got to go back. You got to go back and redo it because it's not valid. And of course, it would be done by individual cases, like it is today. Somebody brings it a cause and they do it. Okay, so that was order, and it was understood, and our country was built on these three legs with the purpose of never having dominance in any of them, which is what happened in England. And they already were coming from that and said, let's make sure that none of those can dominate. They all have to check and balance each other. So in the last 20, 30 years, a couple things have happened, and that is that the executive branch has taken on the role of making law. It's called an executive order.
Right.
So
and that's happened more and more often.
More and more often. And by the way, it happens on both sides. So that when the Republicans, Trump became president, he signed hundreds of executive orders, counteracting what was there before him, Obama.
Right.
Okay, Trump gets defeated and Biden steps in. He signs hundreds of executive orders, and they become, in a sense, law. This is the law of the land. It bypassed Congress.
Which really, I'm going to age myself in this, but that takes away all the beautiful sentiment that I remember from watching that little cartoon bill on Capitol Hill and the song playing through my mind of how a bill becomes a law.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah, remember that? You remember that?
I do.
Yes. And then the courts, and this happened again over the last 40, 50 years, they became initiators of law as well. So they were, and they became what's called politically active, so that instead of just interpreting what the Congress had decided as law, they said, well, we've decided that we are going to determine the law, and it's not related to you, it's what we decide. And so that's why today a circuit judge, for example, that can be in a state, can basically annul the entire state, all states' laws by a simple ruling. I've decided that. And then, because what happens is, it's called precedence. And because he decided it, now everybody can say, well, that's the new law. So it doesn't matter that our state law says this, we're following that. And
that's the case they'll actually cite to make their argument.
That's right. That's right. And then of course it can be challenged. Well, I don't agree with that. So it goes up the system. It's called appeals. And it winds up potentially in the Supreme Court, where they then rule, but then they become the law of the land as well. Right. But they're ruling on somebody else that had made the law, not the law that was established by Congress. But even that was semi workable and orderly in terms of how we function. But what's happened now is that the departments that is really under the executive branch, so like the CDC was established by the executive branch.
Okay.
We need a department to handle disease. Okay, we need a Department of Defense. Right. We need a Department of Health and Education. That's all created by the executive branch. Well, nowhere are any of those departments ever to declare anything as law. They're just supposed to manage. They're just supposed to manage things and contribute to things and follow. Even the military has to follow the law of the land. They can't go and make their own law.
Right.
Well, the CDC just made their own law. I extend the moratorium, and people are saying, and I'm talking about people who are constitutional in nature, are saying, wait a second, and even forgetting whether I agree or disagree with what you just did isn't orderly according to the structure we have in place. So what does that mean? Well,
so it's not even necessarily objecting to what's being done, but the process by which it's happening.
The process and the fact that you don't really have the authority to do that, and it's not through due process. It's not a matter of let's not discuss it, but let's just go to the legislature and let them discuss it and come up with an answer. Even potentially an executive order, which is a problem all by itself. But the CDC declares so. And here's what I'm trying to get to in terms of the impact of that, and that is that chaos is disorder.
Right.
So whenever you have a system that is functioning and you have a new entry into changing that without due process, you've just introduced chaos. So as we talk about the impact of it just per se, underneath it is another level of chaos, which is the order of how we function is being altered. Which, by the way, what does that mean? It'll impact downstream
Right.
more and more chaos, because if that's not challenged and put back to the way it's supposed to be, other departments can then say, well, then we declare this and we declare this. And so it's an interesting thing to me of seeing the chaos, that we have, that is certainly picking up speed because of it. And what I see is that the chaos will contribute and continue to get more intense. Okay, now what does that mean to me? I don't know what to do. How do I handle that? How do I process that? What is that going to mean for me in terms of my economics and my lifestyle and my living? How is that going to impact, what I'm doing or my community? I don't know. Well, this is what you and I are trying to say is exactly.
Right.
We don't know, but we do know who does know. And that's God, the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. And we have the Holy Spirit within us. He says, well, this doesn't surprise me any. And interesting enough, he says it doesn't limit me in providing to you the abundant life, because it's not subject to the difficulty of the world. It's about what I can do by providing for you answers, resolution, things that only I can do supernaturally, and guidance for you to have wisdom to know what to do next and what to prepare for. So that's why we are so committed to abiding and seeking God's will, because without it, we're going to get more and more, I would say, hopeless, discouraged, fearful, worried. And he says, well, you don't need to be. You can live a life of joy, peace, righteousness, freedom, tremendous expectation, because I can do this. And that's all we're trying to do is share with you that we see the chaos and we see it going, with examples, we can see it going more and more chaotic, which should promote us all to say, well, then I need to know some answers. And what we're saying, by the way, you and I, as we know, we don't have any answers.
Right.
But we do know who does, and what we're trying to help you understand is just get connected, and start to follow, because he'll guide you personally throughout this chaos.
It's funny, even as you say that, it reminds me of the verse in Psalms 23. We've talked about it before, but how he talks about that he prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies.
Yeah.
And so in the middle of it, he is still preparing. And I think even that illustration, preparing a table before us, he has food for us. He has bread for us. He says he is the bread of life. And I think about how many people I was on a walk with somebody the other day. This is a bit of a tangent, but go with me on it because I think you'll see where I'm going. I was on a walk with somebody the other day who was really just seeking some wisdom, and we were bouncing around just thoughts, and I'm talking to her about her time, and is she asking, is she really seeking, and she was a little too busy to. And I even suggested, I said, really, you are going into the fire tonight in this situation you're walking into. I would really encourage you to set aside time today, fasting and praying and really seeking, getting in his word and feeding on that. He is the bread of life. And she's like, fasting, do I really have to fast? And I'm like, no, you don't have to fast. But I'm just saying, I want you to really get in his word and seek him. But then I heard something later on that was a podcast that even talked about um, how his word is the bread of life. And how interesting that we fight often. I mean, all of us a lot of times cringe at the idea of fasting from food, because I can't go all day long without food. I can't go all week long without food. What would happen to me if I did not eat today? Let's flip that. And he says he's the bread of life. I can't go a moment without hearing what he has to say.
Right.
I can't go a day without knowing the wisdom he has to give me, a week without. Why do we so quickly relinquish going without the true bread of life, but we won't go without food?
Yes.
You know?
That is interesting. And as you say that, Psalm 23, he prepares a table, by the way, a feast in the presence of my enemy. And then, by the way, it keeps going. It says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the rest of the days of my life. Okay, now this is really cool. The Hebrew word for mercy is covenant loyalty.
I love that.
Surely exceptional, what I call exceptional goodness, supernatural, superb, the abundant life. That's really the same word as abundant life.
Yes.
And God speaking, my loyalty to the covenant, I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing, will follow you all the days of your life,
right.
Which is implying that it's always available, and you have to receive it. It's always there. A lot of people don't receive it, but it's always there, and that's why, as we're trying to talk about chaos, and you talk about the beauty of walking with God, is that circumstance doesn't matter.
Right. It's right in the presence of our enemies.
Yep.
Not pulling you out of it.
Yeah.
You're right in the middle of it.
And as we talked about last Wednesday, as we're thinking of God's will, and you were trying to illustrate that with this woman, is it's a simple choice. Why don't you just spend time with God speaking? Why don't you just spend time with me? I understand. God speaking, I know what you're going through. I know all about it. I have an answer for that. Come and spend time with me. And we remember we said Deuteronomy 30:15-20 says, I set before you life or death, blessing or cursing. Choose life. Walk with me. And he said, now this is possible because I've given you myself to be able to walk with me. So it's interesting enough, and this is where we kind of get stuck as believers. We kind of take it on of us in our natural state. I'm supposed to make sure I do everything perfectly.
Right.
And that's following God. He said, no, it's you following me as I'm guiding you through the Holy Spirit, which I placed within you. I'll do the work, come and enjoy it. And he says, and the reason that you can do that is because Christ gave us the insight and the example of that. So go to John chapter 5. John chapter 5, and read verses 18-20, and then verse 30. Jesus makes an interesting statement here.
Great. This was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees his Father doing. For whatever the Father does, that the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. And greater works than these he will show him, so that you may marvel. And then verse 30, I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me.
Yep. And then let's add to that and go to John 8:28-30. So Jesus speaks again about this, so we can kind of put this together. John 8:28-30.
Says, so Jesus said to them, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me. And he who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him. And as he was saying these things, many believed in him.
Yep. So Jesus, as he was on earth, and he came obviously as a man, the Son of God, he says, I only did where the Father was at work. I only did what I heard the Father speak. I only did what pleases the Father, because he said, I've come to do only the will of the Father.
Right.
So he understood the relationship of my father, we started out this whole podcast series with John 15. Christ said, I'm the vine, the Father is the vine dresser. He's the one that has the plan. He's the one that carries out everything as a decision maker and has a will. And Jesus said, I don't approach even my ministry, which he said, I understand what I'm doing. I know the purpose of what I'm doing. And he describes it to his disciples, which, by the way, they didn't quite understand. But, I'm going to go to my death. And I'm going to be resurrected. And, of course, it just went over their head. It's like, I don't know what that is. But, you're the Messiah, and we're going to take over, And so, they didn't quite understand it. But he said, I understand my purpose, and why I've come, and it began. Of course, he was baptized by John, and he was baptized with the Holy Spirit that came upon him, and basically, it's okay. Now at age 30, this is it,
Right.
Interesting enough. The first thing he does, I don't know if you remember this, but after he's baptized, where does he wind up going? Into the wilderness. He went into the wilderness, and he's
the 40 days.
40 days of being with the Father only, and he is communing with, basically, he's getting instruction. Okay, exactly. How is this going to work? And I want you to call 12 guys. Am I going to know who they are? Yep, I'll tell you who they are. Are you talking about Pharisees? Are you talking about Sadducees? Are these educated religious guys? They, because they study the word, they know the word. It'll be those guys, right? No. It's going to be people that know nothing.
Right. Have you been watching The Chosen at all?
I haven't seen that. No, I hear it's good though.
You need to watch it. It's good.
Good.
It brings life to what you're describing here, just because it brings it all to life.
Yeah.
Just watching it happen.
Yeah. And so these are going to be uneducated guys, not high in society, don't have much religious understanding, but they have hearts, and so. And one of them, by the way, is going to betray you. And so he sorted all that through for that 40 days as he's understanding, okay, and you are going to go. Remember, we're going to have you go to the crucifixion, and you will be resurrected, and, et cetera, et cetera. And then he's tempted by Satan, by the way. Goes through that. And then he starts his ministry. And again, and this is really cool as we understand, what Jesus was and did, is that God the Father said, just walk with me, and I'll alert you and tell you, what to do and how to do it, what to do next. And because it wasn't like, okay, great, you've got 40 days under your belt. Day one, start preaching, start doing this, he just said, just relax. I'll show you. It started, and I'll show you. So the first thing he does, he's with his mom, and they go to a wedding in Cana. And Cana is about probably a half a day walk, maybe a little bit longer than a half a day walk from Nazareth, where they were living. And a wedding, in the Jewish time, it was definitely, by the way, that's why most weddings for a long, long time around the world occurred in the summer, because that's what it was in the Hebrew time, because it would be one big party.
Right. And a long event, not just a couple hours. And
it was right. 5, 6, 7 days event. You would have all these guests come. They're present to the bride and the bridegroom was always the same: food. It was like a Christian potluck. You bring food for you and enough for other people. So you had all these people bring all this food so they could survive the week of eating, because the parents couldn't support that. The father would provide the wine.
Right.
And, for us, it would be the equivalent of providing, water, bubbled water, and soda pop. That's what they drank wine as a normal course of drinking. And it was less diluted than we have wine today, so it wouldn't have been as alcoholic. It was alcoholic because of the way
but it was indeed alcoholic.
It was alcoholic, the way they make it, but it would be wine, and the father would provide that throughout the entire week. Well, he's there, and just his disciples are there. He's there, and so he's already called them. They're with him, and he's with his mom, and they run out of wine. So his mom goes, okay, son, take care of it. He understood what that meant. By the way, it didn't mean go out and buy more wine. She said, fix the problem, take care of it. Okay, now.
And I love, you've talked before about the fact that means she's seen him do this before.
She had absolutely seen him do this before.
Her. Yes.
He'd done this at home. And it was just click, click, got it. Okay, they got a big problem. Take care of it. Jesus' response was, it is not my time, woman. And of course, she says, yes, it is. It turns to the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. Now, because of this statement that we just read in John 5 and John 8, Jesus says, I did nothing except what the Father told me.
Right.
And he started the process with, no, it isn't my time. Now, the reason he said that was, I haven't heard anything from the Father that that's something I'm supposed to do. And so therefore, no, I'm not doing it. And she said, you got to reconsider that, which he did. So he goes to the Father. Okay, Father, are you saying I'm supposed to do this miracle, turn water to wine? Yep, this is it. Okay. See, it was the spiritual process of, I understood while I'm doing life, God gave me a assignment, and I understood it. And I carried it out, go fill these jugs with water. And they were 60-gallon jugs. And then go draw it out for the master. And he got it, and he said, man, this is the best wine ever. Usually they dilute it to make it even more watered down, but you made the best. And interesting enough, that was his first miracle. His mom knew about it. Jesus knew about it. The servants knew about it because they experienced it, and they were overwhelmed. But interesting enough, the key was the disciples. They saw it, and they saw the miracle. And it said after they saw the miracle, they believed. It's like everything he's been telling us. You know what? This is it.
Right.
Now, they didn't fully understand it all, and they had a hard time even believing further miracles, but it said they believed that what he just had told them was so because of that miracle.
Right.
So the beautiful thing, as we're trying to understand God's will, is that, and we'll get into this again in depth next time, is that Christ said, well, this is how it worked for me. I followed God the Father's will all the time.
Right.
And we're going to learn, as he said in John 15:5, which we'll repeat again next time, is apart from me, you can do nothing. He said, you people, you believers, you humans can be in that same spot of doing only what the Father speaks because I have placed myself within you. And do you have a heart to follow, hear, and process, so
Mm-hmm.
that he can tell you, yes, this is my will. When? Today.
Yes.
And by the way, it's out of the understanding, like you introduced us today, is it's in the presence of your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Things are not going to be rosy, but I'm going to prepare the feast in front of that. And by the way, the abundant life and covenant loyalty, my loyalty to the covenant, is going to follow you all your time. You can
Mm-hmm.
count on that as you seek my will. So we'll talk more about that. So we're again at the end. Boy, how much fun are we having? This is
I love that we get to have these conversations.
yeah,
It's such a blessing.
It is really cool how God takes it to illustrate truth. And again, if you got questions, send them in on the podcast, YouTube comments, or email us at AFJ Ministry, questions@afjministry.com, questions@afjministry.com. And Kathy and I, we just keep getting more excited.
Yes.
To keep sharing these beautiful truths with you, and help all of us understand the beauty and the wonder of walking with God. How fun is that?
Absolutely. It's a privilege. If you enjoyed today, be a friend, tell a friend. We have a great week ahead.
Yep.
And we just really appreciate all of you guys joining us. It is a privilege.
Yep. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.